about crypto news, NFT news, market news. Used to be an editor at NFT Now. And I also work in doing sourcing and marketing for Bitcoin Frontier Fund, which is a fund that invests in early stage startups in the Bitcoin space. I don't know how long this intro should be, but I started off before my Web3 journey. I was a journalist in the normie space. Started off writing in digital and in newspapers, and then moved to TV news, and then worked in that for 4 to 5 years before I discovered NFTs and Web3, and then started, fully committing to the crypto world. So here I am. It's been 4 years, and I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. It's great to be here with you guys.
Thank you so much, Erica. Naomi, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Naomi, and yeah, I'm a writer as everybody else on here. So I write, I think, and I have existential crises, and I think it's all tied together. But yeah, at the moment, I'm mostly working with a project called SQD. It's a very techy product, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. It's about data access and indexing. But apart from that, I also write a newsletter for an Australian exchange, randomly enough. I've never been to Australia, so but anyway. And yeah, also for some other publications. And for a while, I was also hosting spaces quite actively as I was trying to get into the new ecosystem. And then at some point, I stopped because I wasn't getting too excited about it anymore. Yeah, so that's what I do. I've been in crypto for 6 years, but a writer for, let's say, full-time-ish for maybe 4, because I started in crypto as sales. And I must say, I absolutely hate sales, but I have a lot of respect for people who do it. So yeah, that's me.
Well, it's so good to meet you, Naomi. I think we're in quite a few chats together, so you always say smart stuff.
I try to. I read a lot. I think that helps.
Yeah. How about you, Deanna?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Riley. My name is Diana Alexandrova. I have been a writer since, similar to you, Riley, since I was a child, because I grew up with very, very demanding Eastern European parents who were all teachers. And so that had to happen. I was a writer in the normie space, just like Erica. I was actually a travel writer for a number of years. So I worked for a media publication, and they would send me on a trip, and I would have to write about it and take photos. And when the pandemic hit and travel wasn't a thing overnight, I became a copywriter. So you talked about Rory Sutherland a little bit. I actually used to work at the same event that he would frequent as a speaker. And I got obsessed with copywriting and how to influence people in a non-sketchy way to take action, whether it is to join a community or buy a product or something. And in 2023, my very annoying partner actually dragged me to NFC Lisbon, and I had my first taste of the Web3 and crypto space, and I was obsessed. And I decided to build a career for myself, and I didn't know how to begin. So I took my writing skill set and my speaking skill set, and what I do today is I am a freelance writer. And I also work as a senior account executive at Melrose PR, where I write many op-eds on behalf of clients. And I also am a stage MC. So if you hit up a crypto conference in Europe, you will probably see me somewhere, whether that's on a stage or a side stage or just somewhere in the vicinity. So that's me. So happy to be here.
Yeah, you're always doing something exciting. Always love seeing your photos.
Thank you.
Why me? I have been a longtime enjoyer of Terminally Onchain, so I'm eager to hear from you, and so glad that you joined us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Riley. Also, that was one heck of an intro, tough act to follow. But I guess a bit about me. I am more on the opposite end. I was never really a writer at all. I used to be a software engineer at big tech companies. So if you told me like 4 or 5 years ago when I got into crypto that I'd be doing writing full time, I probably would have left. But I actually got into both writing and crypto at the same time because I was worried at my last job that my boss would catch me like slacking off. So I made an anonymous account like many people in crypto and just started tweeting about what I was doing, like different products I was using. And I guess I found this tiny niche, well, at least back in 2019, where there were a lot of folks trying to understand more of the technical side of things. And I think, like Riley was mentioning in her intro, like there was a need for some storytelling of, okay, here's sort of how this works in like simple English language. And I just kept on doing that for like 2 years. And eventually in 2021, quit my job and just decided to go full time into this whole crypto writing thing. And uh, in between, did some investing work as well at a venture fund. But now I just sort of said, hey, I'm early into my career. I'm going to give myself like a couple of years to just try all kinds of content, see what suits my style. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but like I'm still every day trying to figure out what's the best cadence for me, what kind of content do I like, and it's still a work in progress. Right now, I'm working on my newsletter hosted on Paragraph. It's called Terminally Onchain, and I basically just do deep dives twice a week, mainly around like the base Farcaster ecosystems. But every now and then, if there's something interesting going on in general crypto land, I'll talk about that. But yeah, happy to be here.
Well, you talked about cadence, so I would love to start there. I took a bit of a writing break on my newsletter for this summer because I sort of got uninspired. I don't know. It's hard to say that, but it's like, I don't know. Things just weren't exciting to me for a little bit. And I hate saying that, but it's the truth, right? Sometimes you're just not in the mood to write, or you don't really find anything especially exciting, which has got to be tough for you because of how often you write about the things that you do. And I'm just like coming up with things off the top of my head to write about. And I would love to hear how everyone sort of gets their inspiration, or if you get sent briefs or you just find things randomly to write about. I would love to hear that. For myself, I watch a lot of YouTube, but I'm also on Twitter and Farcaster a lot and in a lot of group chats. So all of those things give me inspiration and sort of just like random ideas of things that I should write more about. But as far as my watch time on YouTube goes, it's like I don't watch any crypto stuff anymore on YouTube. But I will say that I did get introduced to crypto through YouTube. Two channels in particular are Coin Bureau and Whiteboard Crypto. This was in 2021, and what was pretty wild to me was Coin Bureau back in the day. He would rhyme in every one of his videos, and it was hilarious, but it stuck with you. They were like, I don't know, were they limericks or something? They were like a special,
His like
certain kind of.
disclaimers, his
Yes,
like,
yes,
warnings and stuff would always be like little riddles and rhymes. And
yes.
stuff. It was, it was great.
But Whiteboard Crypto is still today one of the best educational sources that anybody can go to. And not a lot of people now know about it because, like, I don't know. But anyway, I would love to hear from everyone else.
Yeah, I can start. I would say like my writing has been influenced a lot by like the way that radar works and like how trend spotting works, which is just like noticing signals out in the wild. Like I'll see an article and be like, oh, that's interesting. And then kind of I use Arena a lot, or I literally like cut and paste things. I have like a journal where I'll like collage and stuff and like kind of like cluster ideas together. And then over time I'll start to see more like patterns. Like, you know, post-individualism has been like a huge thing for me. Like it was like big essay, that the first big essay I wrote like for a crypto publication. I think that was like 2020 or 2021. And it was like all these ideas I had floating around. And then ever since then, I still am like following that thread and pulling at it because there's so many things, especially in Web3, but just in the wider world of people striving and like looking for community, and like a world where we've all been like become very individualized, sort of like siloed off. So that's like one way. It's like the way I think about it is the conspiracy theory meme where it's like Pepe Sylvia and there's like all the like, that's like me. But the problem with that, or not the problem, just like what I've found works for me is like I can't, like I've tried so hard so many times for years to be like, oh, I'm going to put out one article a week, or I'm going to do like 2 posts a week, or I'm going to have a Substack and do one a month or whatever. Like I'll like create 3 articles in 1 week and then not write anything for a month. And like, that's why I think it's worked out for me that my like day job, they're very closely related, but like most of my like work is marketing, and then my more like creative, the stuff that really like drives me is writing, because it's so hard for me. Like some people I'm so like envious of because they're like able to really like organize systems to be able to like produce a certain amount of content, but I just like can't. Even with like, I tried so hard to have like a Farcaster streak, like that was like the whole summer I was like 5 days like this is really good, and then like just wouldn't happen. So I think that's another thing for me. And then Riley, like this really stood out to me, like my YouTube time like on my phone is like higher than any other app like combined. Like I watch so many like weird like I go down rabbit holes and I'll get like obsessed with like something, just like random things. Like right now I'm like really obsessed with like internet scammer stories, and I'll like listen to podcasts and I'll get like really into it. And then like I find that these like little pockets of culture, whatever it is, like I went from like my last thing was like stamp collecting. So that's like gives you an idea of the range of that. Like those things will inspire me too. Like it might not be directly related to crypto, but like everything is kind of related in some ways. So
Yeah, I watch a lot of video essays.
yes, oh my
But
god, love. I
like
was in a
3-hour
Tradwife.
long.
Yeah, a Tradwife video essay binge like last week. Like it's so great. I love those. Who's your favorite? Who are your favorite video essay people? If you can think of any, I want to follow them.
Philosophy Tube
Okay.
is really good. She was actually recently in both Star Wars and Game of Thrones, House of Dragons. So yeah.
Whoa.
But her videos on philosophy are just so good. Erica, what about you? Do you get briefs, or are you told like please write about this or whatever?
Before, when I was full-time just working as a journalist, then, people like Diana would, at the PR firm send briefs, but a lot of times we get to pick and choose if we want them or not, because sometimes it might just be too PR driven, which I feel like, you know, you want to write something because you want to write something and you want to be unbiased about it, not because you want to really just push that narrative for someone. But now that I do kind of like journalist work more on the side now, I get to pick what I really want to write. And I think that makes me so much happier when I'm making content, because sometimes like those quick hits, that the news of the day that you have to do, it gets really, it feels like you're in a factory, right? And you're like churning things out. But yeah, no, I get to like pick topics that I feel really passionate about. So like Liv was talking about, like I really love like internet communities. I recently wrote about DGods, which I feel like, because I'm really interested in cults as well. So like before Web3, like I wrote about the Nexium cult, like I covered someone who was part of it. And I just like think the psychology of that and like what makes people so like obsessed and like, so fervent about it makes me really, really like fascinated. And yeah, so I really like pieces where I get to like put my personal touch into it rather than just being really formulaic. But that's quite rare. So Yeah, that's why I really like it when people do like their own newsletters and creative writing, because a lot of times there isn't that type of there's too much structure in traditional journalism or just in some publications. Yeah, but um, I just want to say, like, I've been on a lot of Twitter Spaces, and I just feel like this is such a peaceful, welcoming environment. Like, no one's interrupting each other, everyone's listening, everyone's waiting for someone else to talk. I just think it's so beautiful. Like, maybe I've just been like in too many spaces where people are just like talking over each other and like no one can finish a sentence, but I'm like shocked that I'm like finishing these sentences. I'm like, oh wow, I can keep going. But anyways, yeah, I I think like when I think about, discipline in writing, that's something that I always struggle with as well. And I think about like when I was little, my mom was like, "Oh, well, you don't want to go to school every day, but you just have to, you know? It's like it's just the reps that you put in." And so I've tried like those things like, like National Novels Writer Month where like you have to write every single day to like meet a quota. And like I think sometimes that's good. Like it forces you to write like a certain amount, but sometimes they might not be good. So, I mean, I don't know. I want to hear everyone else's thoughts. Like, do you think it's better to force yourself to have a system and maybe writing anything is better than nothing? Or is it better to have spurts of inspiration?
I can say something on that because earlier this year, I tried to do that thing where you write. Well, I wasn't going to be too ambitious and write like every day, but every weekday. And I managed to keep it going for like, I think 30 days in a row. Like, so with weekends in between. And then I was like, nah, I cannot live like this. And then I was just like, fuck it. Okay, I'm not going to continue because it gets really hard to find inspiration at some point. And you're like, okay, I'm going to write about stones because this is the thing I've been seeing laying around a lot. And then you're like, okay, I don't know if this is quality. I mean, some people even like that piece, but I was like, yeah, maybe it's not that great. But in terms of cadence, I mean, at work, I do have a certain freedom. And at some point, we changed our brand. And then the question became, okay, let's write SEO articles. And then I made a joke about how that feels like a strange labor to me. And since then, I've not been asked to write any again. So I think I achieved my personal goal there. And I'm lucky now that I'm kind of fairly free in what I pick, as long as it's relevant to the stuff that our company is trying to achieve. With the newsletters I write, it's a bi-weekly one, and usually it covers like stories and crypto. And because it's always every 2 weeks, it's fairly free. Like you can pick the stories as you like, and then you can kind of make them fit together. Like the last one, it was called All PR is Not Good. And then I picked 3 stories that make us look really bad to like normies. Once I even went as far as using like Dies Irae, like a requiem for a dream. And then I had like all the 3 pieces were like parts of a requiem. So I get pretty lucky with the gigs I have at the moment. But also I had the same thing like Riley, that at some point, especially all the crypto stuff felt very boring to me and uninspiring. And that's when I started writing about all of the things that are not crypto. And I think I started writing in crypto because I didn't understand it and I tried to learn and see if I actually understood it. And that's how eventually I got into that. And then I got bored of the stuff I saw in crypto and had my few existential crises. And then I started trying to live and experience more stuff outside of crypto and write about that. And kind of that's also what put me into the philosophy and mindfulness and productivity rabbit holes. And then I started writing about those. So I think if people go to my Medium and look at the stuff I've written like 4 years ago, it's mostly crypto. But if you look at my paragraph now, it's totally different. And it's a lot more like the stuff I do in my free time. Like I'm a anime and classical music nerd. So that will also be reflected on there, which sometimes can find its way into the other content I write. But it's not the main topic there. But for me personally, I can do whatever I want and I don't need to stick to a cadence. Sometimes I manage to write something twice a month. Sometimes I don't, at least like personally. But yeah, at work, I actually have like a fixed 3 to 5 blog posts per month. So I always need to figure something out there. But It's usually fairly easy as long as you have a product roadmap and they tell you what's important and what the VCs or whoever wants to hear. So
Well, YB, your content is all about crypto, all of it. So how do you stay inspired? It all of us here have had some form of like uninspired period. So like I would love to know what keeps you going.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said that there weren't like months where I just didn't feel inspired about any crypto topics as well. But I think for me, like after so many iterations of like trying different newsletters and then scrapping that and then trying threads again and then scrapping that and going to this, I sort of realized like the best thing for me to do to keep my anxiety low is just like keep to the cadence of twice a week, like the deadlines that I have. Because I think with any content creation, other than the actual publishing part, everything is so up in the air, right? Like some pieces you sort of just have down and you can like knock it out quickly. Others you're like scrambling right before you need to post. And I just felt that like in the last year or so, the best thing that I did selfishly for myself was just keep those deadlines and then the topics. And I guess just specifically answer your question about the inspiration. Uh, I like to think of it like a almost like a two-pronged approach, right? One is like more so, okay, what is like literally happening in the news in crypto right now? If I'm scrolling on Forecast or Twitter, I'll be bookmarking stuff. I have like a little Apple Note sheets where I can just like add links or random thoughts that come to my head. Super simple. And then the other part that I really like to do is I've always been interested more so in the history of technology, right? So just like even on Forecast, I'll run the Tech Archive channel. And what I've noticed is that if I need inspiration on something to write, oftentimes like just going back to an article that was written in the 90s or learning about some random like innovation thing that happened in the 80s or the 70s, right? Like computing history. I'll be like, oh, whoa, I swear there's like something happening like this in crypto right now. And you can oftentimes map that. So that will be a good source of like, okay, history, you know, the classic cliche saying like history doesn't repeat, but there's there that you can pull from. Oh, sorry, my Siri went off. But yeah, so that helps, I guess.
Well, you are also pretty popular on Farcaster. Are all of you also on Farcaster?
I'm a
Yeah.
lens girl, proudly.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if we could give some advice to people that are watching this, how to best utilize these networks. I know that you have a hypersub as well as this stream does. What can on-chain writers do to sort of get their stuff in front of other people that's not only on-chain but like become more visible?
I think the quick answer here is I like on-chain writing is like not really even a thing yet, right? It just like it feels like a group chat of us just trying random things out and sort of pushing into a black hole. So the motto I have in my head is just like if there is a tool that I haven't tried, just give it a shot, spam it a bit for a month, and if you like it, continue. If not, like just stop, right, and go to something else. So I'm like thinking of this entire thing as an experiment, right? Even Paragraph is established, but we don't actually know what Paragraph will look like in 6 months to a year. Like I've been using it for now a year and a half when I first met Colin, and the product looks so different even then, right? Hypersub looked totally, it wasn't even called Hypersub more than 10 months ago. So I'm just thinking of these as like small experiments that maybe they work out for the short term. If not, I'm just going to give it a shot to make sure that, you know, if I'm already in this super, super niche ecosystem of on-chain content creation, I might as well just give everything a shot. And then touching on the other part of your question, like how to just get more in the spotlight, like I have found many people that came onto Farcaster, like when it went permissionless, and then again when Frames launched. And I've been active, or I had been active on Farcaster for like 2 years now. And what I've noticed that like in the best way possible, there have been folks that came in, they wanted to also do writing. They saw I was doing writing. They engaged with me a lot in their replies. They specifically DM me some of their posts just to get thoughts. They gave me feedback on my own writing and like made such a proactive effort. And now they have their own following above X followers, right? And not that they don't engage with me anymore, but you know, they don't like the whole reply guy thing works because it's just like, can I bootstrap YB's network? I'm sure he's already found a lot of folks that enjoy writing on crypto in this space. So just use that. And like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it if you're being authentic and you know, using larger creators or people with a larger following to just get started. I think that's typically the best way to go. So
Yeah, those are really good tips. And Erica, you are super popular as well. And so I think leveraging communities like DGods, your recent article, sort of puts you even more into the spotlight, right?
Yeah, I would say that I'm not as popular on Farcaster as I am on X, but honestly, like I don't really want to think about like whether someone is, like
Right.
popular or not, like what, YB said. I try not to think about that because, everyone started off with 0 followers as well. But yeah, no, when I think about leveraging communities, when I try to write something, I'm not like, oh, what communities get the most engagement? Let me pick that community so I can get a lot of views. I think it's more important to just write about what you feel is really interesting. So I wasn't really that much interested in the fact that they were like bros or like that they're all like which is cool, like, right? But I was more fascinated by how many people, like, because I started off in the NFT space, in 2020, 2021, and I was interested in how the shift from Discord to Telegram is like starting and how that affects the culture. So it was more about that. And so I felt like, writing about that. And I think I was really fair too. I like ended the piece kind of like, oh, they like to raid certain people and they make you feel like the most important person for the day. But, after I leave, like tomorrow, it's not going to be me anymore. And so I just wanted to be honest about that as well. And so I felt like that kind of writing is better than like, oh, I love DGods, like my post. But yeah, no, I feel like, there are really, really strong pockets of communities like Boys Club and like people at SheFi. And like, I'm part of both of those. I'm just not as active, but I used to be really active on Farcaster. I do need to be more active again. But I remember like it was like my goal to reply to like a certain amount of people a day. And sometimes just like raids on Telegram, those can be feel kind of manufactured, right? But if we think about that's kind of like a way for me to support people that I otherwise wouldn't have, you feel a little better doing it. Maybe you're rewiring your brain, but yeah, I think what was the question? It was like how to get people engaged in your content, or was it just what how do people do that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I think just being true to yourself, honestly, because sometimes when people do that for engage, it just shows and it looks really fake. So I'd rather just because some people grind it out for years and then they have that moment where a lot of people are noticing them. And I think I've had like X for like over 10 years and it's not like I ever like you can have like 5 likes, but as long as those people are really, really engaged in your content, it's better than having like a million followers that don't even really know what you do. So
I just wanted to add one point to that quickly, to what Erica said. I think if you aren't being true to yourself or authentic with your strategy, you'll quickly burn out anyways. The times I've sort of forced certain growth strategies or just trying to like write at a cadence that wasn't for me or a style, like I got bored of it or just frustrated with it in like a week or two. So if it's not authentic and you're not enjoying it, you're just probably going to stop realistically.
Yep. It goes back to writing whatever you love, right? And not forcing subjects that aren't exciting to you. Do you want to talk about storytelling? How do you sort of are you all like event goers, and do you go to I'm curious to know how you all would, what's your process of like telling the story of an event and writing about that, and how we sort of go from, okay, like a lot of what I see is like people saying, "Hey, I'm world building here," or "Hey, I'm telling a story," but then like making it feel so like you said, manufactured, and it's like, or like formulaic, like here's where we went. Here's what we did. Here's a photo of people in really expensive clothes. Here's what we ate. Here's the panel that we went on. But that's so boring. It's like, okay, so if that's the case, and we absolutely hate that, how do we as storytellers, as writers, sort of invite people into that story of the place that we went to and the things that we sort of did, the things that we experienced. Because otherwise, people aren't going to read it. People aren't going to care about the event. And I personally love that kind of content. Sort of that feeling of inviting people into that experience, because a lot of people in the space can't make it to these events. It's too expensive. It is really overstimulating. But I think it's sort of our job as content creators and writers to give people a way in, for free, right? It's like, okay, you can't attend, that sucks, but let me bring you that, let me hold your hand and bring you there myself, right? So how do we do that?
I can take this one since I go to so many events. Actually, what you said there, Riley, take your hand and take it to the event is so, so true. And by the way, I'll give a tip to anyone who's interested in going to events for free, meaning not paying for tickets. Before I worked in PR for other people, I have been pitching myself to go and get stuff for free. So what I would do as a writer is I would just get in touch with the event and say, hey, this is who I am. Here's a couple samples of my writing. I would love to come and experience the event and write something for you and share on my profiles like LinkedIn, X, etc. And more often than not, like I would say like 80% of the time, it's a yes. So if there's an event that you really want to go to, please put yourself forward. You lose nothing. Even if they say no, like it doesn't mean that they hate you and nothing bad's going to happen. So I promise. As for the event, so I kind of have this like twofold approach. I travel with my phone everywhere. I've got two phones. So this is my work phone that's really old. And if it gets stolen, it's fine. And this is my content phone. So I take videos and pictures of anything and everything, like waking up to go to the event, like what I'm having for coffee, like meeting people. And then I use that. And this is something that I do to myself, which it's not for everyone, but after like every day of the event, I would get to my hotel and I would just sit on the bed and I would just like write like what happened, who made an impression, what is it that they told me, how did it feel, what was their energy like, to get this kind of summary. And a really good example was ECC. So this year, I don't know, maybe a few of you went to ECC. It was so chaotic. There were hundreds of side events, and I have ADHD, so overstimulation is a big issue for me. So I try to be very selective with where I go. So every night after the event, and I was there for 5 days, I would just get back to my room and write like, today we went to the Shifai Summit, and here's how it was different from last year. And these were the people that spoke on stage. But at the same time, instead of it just being a listicle of like, this happened and so was there wearing that kind of like clothing, I would just like focus on things that people told me personally. Like, for example, the story, like Brick from Harpy shared a really lovely story about her daughter with me. And she was like, yeah, ever since she's been 7, she's been like going and speaking on stage as this kid. And then she asked me how to get a boys club hat because I was wearing a boys club hat. So I would try to find little anecdotes of conversations that happened during the event. I would also see, if there was anyone there that was doing something like yoga session by Lori from Shifi. I was like, how are you into yoga? What did you have to do to bring yoga on chain? What does that even mean? Like, what do people say when you say yoga on chain? Do they think there's actual chains involved? So just finding little anecdotes and making it a little juicy with that personality of the story. And if you're able to grab some content, it doesn't have to be super polished or professional. You don't need a camera, and just edit it in like CapCut and just post it so people can see from your POV. And I would say it's very important not to just be like, hey, I felt this and I experienced that, but like, what did other people say to you and how did other people feel, and who was like brightening the room, and who would you like to give a shout out to? And also, like, people love small little details. Like, for example, at the NFC speakers dinner, it was sponsored by Ledger and Balenciaga, and the food was so Balenciaga, it was weird. It was like tiny little burgers that for some reason were just like a chicken burger piece with like barely any bun, and the bun was dark, and there was a lot of like weird tiny little finger-sized desserts. People love hearing that stuff. It brings a personality. It's as if they're almost there. So I think really pick the little things that aren't obvious, these little pockets of juiciness, and weave them into your piece.
So, like, my first thought with this question is my background is like really varied. Like, how I ended up in crypto is like a roller coaster ride, but I went to school for communication design and I minored in photography, and I was really into photojournalism. And for a few years, I like lived in a punk house, like a squat, which is like an illegal housing situation in the Lower East Side, and I took photos of people who would travel there and play shows, and um, I just like photographed every aspect of my life, and I've always been kind of a person who can like blend into the background enough that like, but also like kind of like integrate into a community enough that like people trust me. So, and I never wanted to take photos that people didn't want of themselves. Like a lot of the photos that I love the most were like ones that people saw and they're like, oh, that's really cool. I love that picture of me. Like, can I have a copy of it? So that was sort of like how I started storytelling. And then after college, I started writing for underground music blogs. And that's how I've always been a writer, like my entire life, but that's how those two things started coming together. And then I just eventually became a journalist full time for a few years. I was doing like freelance journalism, but it's still like a habit of mine to bring a camera with me everywhere. Like I love the Fujifilm cameras because they're like small and light, and they're like just infinitely better than an iPhone picture. Like just something about like Fujifilm has like a sort of like cinematic quality to it. Even if I don't use the pictures in any of my like coverage of something, I still like can look back on it. Like I did use a lot of them, and when I went to Youth Ever for the first time, it was I'm a part of Pool Together, not so active now, but at that time I was really involved, and we put on the first PoolieCon, so it was like adjacent to Youth Denver. It was like a whole day of Pool Together, like DeFi chilling, and like we had different people came to talk, like Avi, not Avi, Yanni, right, from Ave and Lens. Stani came and talked, and just a bunch of really cool people giving talks about different aspects and things that could integrate into Pool Together. And I took photos of like everything the whole day. And also like my experience in Denver, like instead of like just telling people I went to Denver and this is what I did, I kind of tried to like show people, how like all writing teachers say, show, don't tell. Like like I think Diana, you mentioned having ADHD. I have ADHD. And I also have like a few disabilities. Like I have narcolepsy. So sometimes I need to like go take a break. And like something I loved about East Denver was like, there was this like quiet barnyard like area that was like the Zen zone. And like the whole place is in like a horse like arena. So like the Zen zone was like separate, and like it smelled like horses, and like there was beanbag chairs and snacks, and like there were like crystal healers and very like crunchy granola stuff going on in there. It was really nice. Like like I loved that aspect of it, that I could go like shut off for a while and like just like sit there and like unwind, and then go back into the conference. Like it was like a seamless transition. But like just like little experiences like that. I think Diana, you mentioned that as well. Like what stood out to me, like people I met who really like made me think about something differently. A lot of the side events, like I went to an IKEA DAO side event, and like that's a DAO that's buying like old abandoned properties in rural Japan and then turning them into like creative houses, so like people can go be artists in like a beautiful setting. And like the founder of that DAO brought a bunch of like really yummy Japanese snacks, and we were all like hanging out and talking. It was like so chill. So yeah, like different. I always see like crypto as like the lunchroom from Mean Girls, but like in a nicer way. Like there's like a Kia DAO, and like we're eating snacks, and then like I did the yoga with Cabin DAO, which is another like housing DAO, and like different. Like not every crypto community is like let's go out and party, because like for me that's a lot. So like finding like these different like niche communities and like weaving that into the storytelling of the event is really cool, because people start to see that crypto's much more dimensional than it's been made out to be. So yeah, that's my favorite part about talking about events for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting how we see so much of like those parties where it's not only overwhelming, but it's just like a lot of like drinking and dancing and loud music, and I'm like, okay, but that's not my speed. Like I just want to chill, you know. That's why the Zen Zone was my favorite place at ETH Denver. Like it was so good. Like every conference should have something like that, no matter where it is, because you really need that. You really need a chill place.
Yeah, I was just
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's always good to avoid boat parties because there you can't even leave. And then you're just stuck on a boat with all of these people, and you're like, damn, there's no quiet zone because even in front of the toilet there's a huge queue, so you cannot go and lock yourself in and be like the introvert. Which is like usually I go to conferences because also I don't have ADHD, but I'm like definitely more on the introvert spectrum. And even though people don't usually realize, because I'm good at like acting like I wasn't and had I had endless social battery, but I usually take a book with me to a conference, and it's a good way to escape for a little. If you just open a book, nobody will come talk to you except if they want to talk about the book. And then you also have like you can write about the people that came to you to talk about the book, and then you can weave in the book itself. And I've also started asking people for book recommendations as a like because sometimes at events you're also just sitting at the booth because you're there with the project, right? You can't walk around and see what else is happening, and you also don't really want everybody to give you their pitch and then you give your pitch, and then it's like writing about that would be pretty boring. Like, yeah, you can just go on our website, you will see the same like elevator pitch on there. So yeah, I started asking people about the books, and it can lead to pretty interesting conversations. So I highly recommend like having your own like conversation starter that's related to your own nerd area. Also, anime also works fine. When I was hosting spaces, I would always ask, like, what's your favorite anime? And for the people who had been there before, the most recent favorite. So it's yeah, and it helps, like, if you look at something through the lens of something else, and try to find parallels.
Well, you know, when all we talk about is crypto, people are so surprised when you ask them about
Yes,
their actual life.
I
Right?
know.
We are
There's a
more than
life
just what,
outside.
yeah.
Crazy
Like
idea.
it's like, hey, you actually care about me? You want to know more than, you know, coding or, you know, whatever I do? It's like, wow, you know, it helps make people feel a little bit special when you talk to them about real things that matter, you know, outside of what they do for work. So yes, that's a great idea. Are we all introverts with the ability to be an extrovert? Yeah. Yeah, that's been me for most of my life. Except I used to be a lot more shy than I am now. But as I was telling Erica, like before this, like I'm still pretty nervous doing these things. But if you heard me on Clubhouse in like 2021, I was like my voice was shaking. I didn't know what to talk about. It was the worst thing ever. But like as you do more of these things, it gets a lot easier. You know, it gets a lot easier to just like talk and like be with people who feel like friends. You know. So again, I'm just like so glad that you're all here and we can talk about things that we love doing. So what kind of that being said, what kind of things do you all like doing outside of trying to find research or writing, or do you, Naomi, you said you watch anime, but do you watch a lot of film too? Because personally, I get a lot of inspiration from sort of connecting things that I want to talk about or community building ideas from film. Strangely enough, like I see a story in everything. And so I'm wondering if you're also like that.
I mostly watch anime. Sometimes they do movies, right? Especially to end like a series, and then you already know it's going to be sad or something. Which I guess is not a bad state to be in for a creative either. But no, I actually don't watch that many movies. Occasionally, yes, I do. But I do read a lot of books, and I also go down the YouTube rabbit holes. And also, I've started going to the museum a lot because I got like a 1 year ticket to the local art gallery. So it's like, I think 15 museums in total, and there's 5 or 6 in my city. So I've been to like the exhibition here in the museum like many, many times. And I've started like reading all of the stuff it says next to the pictures, and they also have a lot of books in the museum's bookstore. So I start reading in those about the pictures, and usually there's a lot of stories behind how a work of art comes to be. And yes, I often find those to be pretty interesting, especially if you consider them in the context of their time. Like the Romantic was a very different context to when you go to like the Old Masters Gallery, and it's all like 17th century, and they were all painting these crazy, desks full of food and meat and like animals running around. It's like decadence and opulence, and then you see the complete opposite in the modern paintings. And I think those things I find, pretty inspiring often for storytelling, maybe, and also just generally being inspired.
I've been in like a true crime rabbit hole for like a while now that I can't kick. And like I always used to be like really self-critical, like why do I like enjoy watching this? It's like terrible stuff. But like I realized over time that I really, really like details. Like I've found this to be a thing that worked really well for me as a journalist, and like not so great as like a like person at parties or like making friends, because like people will tell me something and I'm like, well, what exactly happened? Like what time? Like you said this thing happened to your phone, but phones can't do that. Like, or like, you know, like, and I would poke holes and stuff because it's like my natural curiosity, and it's never to be like accusatory. But I think like the thing I like about true crime is like all those details are there. Like, and like a lot of it is like hearing the story and like following different threads and like coming to conclusions and like seeing if they pan out, and the satisfaction of like solving a puzzle, but like in a story form. So I think that's why things like that inspire me a lot. But I get inspiration from like so many things. I love history. Like I used to write for, there's a website called Ranker, and like I feel like everyone's been on it at some point. It's like 20 things that medievalists say aren't true that people think about the medieval era or whatever. Like, and people rank the weirdest one. I was a writer for Weird History for like years. And it was just really fun because yeah, people are weird, and like people have always been weird, and like there's so many fascinating things if you dig into like any era of history. And then you start to see these like repetitive patterns of like, oh, this thing that we think is crazy now is not that crazy. Like I recently found this Assyrian tablet, like the cuneiform, and it was like the translation was like an old guy complaining about the younger generations and how they like spend their money too much, and like how they like, he literally said everyone writes a book these days, and it was like the literal translation of everybody has a podcast, like but from like so long ago. It was so interesting to me. So I think like, yeah, it all comes back to that, like putting things together and like these little like clouds of ideas. That's why I like Miro so much, like Miro boards, because like I'll see something and I'm like, oh, like we think we're doomed and the world is ending, but like people have kind of always felt that way about like newer stuff, and like what is that, like why do we feel so much fear about things that we don't fully understand yet? So yeah, those, I find inspiration in a lot of things. And then like also like going out, like because I'm such an introvert and I like to read and I like to watch documentaries, and like sometimes I can forget that like every time I go out in the world and I'm like talking to people and like interacting, I'm like, whoa, this is like a story but in real life. Like like I kind of forget sort of how important that is. And like one of the things I like to do, I like to go to like local shows, like DIY shows and stuff like that, and just like see what people are doing. And like it's fun. It definitely like takes me out of my like, you know, what's it called, hermit era sometimes. Naomi, I just saw you went down a dictator's rabbit hole. I've been there.
I mean, especially as a German, it's kind of drilled into you in school. So you're like, okay, well, if we're already there, let's find about all the other awful dictators that were there before.
Stalin was crazy, like crazy life.
But also
Bro
maybe
had a
Chinese
crazy life.
dictators. But yeah, it's not such a great topic to write about, though, and then compared to crypto, I guess. So it's probably not.
Probably not. I agree that seeing so many stories and like experiencing those stories in real life as well, it helps you be a better writer, because it's like, okay, this is how a story works and this is how people like to receive stories. And to anyone watching that wants to get into writing or wants to be a better writer, I think that's the place to start, is to experience more stories, whether that's reading them or just like getting out of your house and like saying, oh, so we're hanging out with friends today, we're doing these things, we're having fun, we're smelling these flowers, we're blah blah blah, all these things that happen in real life. Like, stories happen outside of your own brain, right? And the more that you experience those things, the easier it is to just right, to simply just let it out. Whether that is like, whether you keep it to yourself or whether you tell other people, like the more that you do that, the more that you experience and understand and see the like Radar does with those patterns, like the more patterns that you see in the world, the more you're going to be like, oh, wait, this is how this works. And this is how I can tell other people, because like I received it this way. So maybe that's just how the world works. And so that's how people like to, experience stories too.
I just wanted to give a quick example to that. I used to live in East Village, and I would always, just for a break, go to Washington Square Park. And if you've ever like been there in the spring and summertime, they'll typically, or I guess more so in the springtime, they'll turn the fountain off, and a lot of people will just sit around the water fountain in the middle, and there'll be a lot of skateboarders doing their thing in the fountain, right, practicing tricks and just trying to get a bunch of reps in. And one time I was just sitting there and like a bit longer, I just had music on, and I was watching these skateboarders go at it for the same trick, like for 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And then it was just like fall after fall after fall. And eventually one of them got it, like this trick down, right? And everyone started clapping around the circle. And my mind immediately, I think I was just thinking about all the writing stuff, and I was like, wow, it's like similar thing, right? You put out like 30 different pieces, and then it's just the 31st one that'll like pop off and go viral. And that's all you need, right? Because everyone else forgets about the last 30. But the point is that yeah, like I never thought I would have found inspiration from these like NYU skateboarding kids, right? And like here I was just sitting there, and I was like, oh, that actually clicked in my head, and it does give you like a little bit of inspiration. But yeah, just wanted to add that in, and then even for me, like I think Riley, you initially asked like some things we do outside of crypto and writing work. I personally like to just like I play a lot of pool and billiards. I just want to get better at it. It's always seemed like an interesting sport to try out. And then I'll also do a lot of racket sports. I used to play tennis and like well, I guess spike ball isn't a sport, but I used to play tennis and spike ball. Spike ball is not a racket sport, but I played a lot of both of those the last couple of years. And yeah, just like generally going out and trying to talk to people. Very New York thing, but recently I got into going to a lot of the comedy clubs, like New York Comedy Club, Comedy Cellar, and that's been fun because it's a similar thing, right? We're all used to seeing the Netflix specials, but then when you go to these like underground, like more niche comedy clubs, you're like, oh, these like comedians are trying out their jokes hundreds of times at these different sellers in front of like 20, 30 people and then revising and revising, right? And as like a crypto writer, I was like, what do I have in common with like Mark Norman, right? I just saw him recently, but it's like it's really no different. It's just practicing your bits over and over again. So yeah, that's something that's hit for me very recently. Like I would feel guilty initially that hey, I'm not like working. I could be spending this time like reading some like stablecoin research report, but actually taking that hour out of your day to go see something random might actually lead to a burst of writing that's like way better than you just sitting at your laptop.
Yeah, I feel like there are days, like, if I don't force myself, I'm always just, like, indoors, and I know that, like, sometimes if I, because I do go to a lot of conferences, and it could seem like I'm really social, and I think that, like many of us in this, call and this chat and this show, we are good at LARPing, but, obviously we need to go home and recharge. I spent the summer, in New York. I'm originally from LA, but it was so great to be around so many different bookstores. I feel like there are more people that read. I don't know, like, I don't wanna generalize a bunch of people, but I just saw more bookstores. Like, I saw more, like, pockets of, like, indie communities. Like, I like going to the theater. I love watching movies. Like, I have Letterboxd, and I'm, like, always, like, logging, like, what I watch, and it feels good to actually have that break, from crypto, because then you can actually come back and feel more excited about it, because too much of anything is not good, um, even if it's your favorite thing. And so I like the fact that people are writing about non-crypto things like on chain. Like, you're still in crypto. You're just using crypto as like the canvas, as like the host. And it doesn't have to be so neatly fit into the certain box. And so, yeah, I like that. And I was really, really trying to think about what I like to do for fun outside crypto. And I guess I did list a bunch of things, but sometimes I really don't feel like I have a life out of it. But when you think about it, it's like you do, and then you're using all the friends that you've made to experience things in life together too. So yeah.
I mean, I remember Diana said she had like the Eastern European teacher parents that forced her to get into writing. And, I didn't have those, but I have like classical guitarist teacher parents. So they made me play the guitar from when I was 3 years old. And so that kind of stuck with me. And it's like one of the things now that whenever I'm getting really like frustrated or annoyed or bored with crypto, I just leave my desk and go play guitar for a while. And sometimes I pick really hard pieces where I know, okay, this is going to take me months to master, just so I have some sort of project where I know I'm making progress and don't feel so stuck. So yeah, that's, I guess, anything that takes me away from screens. That's what I try to do in the off crypto time.
Something to add to that is I have a daily project. Now, before you think it's crazy, Like it's not that crazy. So I wear an Aura ring and I get really obsessive because ADHD. So I try to hit my like 15 to 20,000 steps per day. But honestly, I think every time I step away from the screen, like even if let's say that I'm doing a freelance project for a client on copywriting, and when I'm walking, like I'm letting these ideas marinate into my brain. And I have this thing where I like to take pictures of plants. So I'll just go to the park and I've got like 5,000 photos of like palm trees and lilies and various things. And I would just kind of look at things and like experience things and see how they smell and literally go and stop and smell roses. And sometimes, like if I've had like a good month at work, like I would get a new pair of shoes. So I got these cute Adidas, the Samba ones, the pink and green ones. Yeah, so I got those, and now when I'm walking, I'm like looking at my shoes and I'm looking at the plants, and at some point on the walk, like I would just like inspiration would hit me, and I would stop and I would take out my phone and just write everything down in the notes. And I noticed that when I kind of put it on the back of my mind, and maybe that's true for you as well, it comes to me in the moment when it's got space to come in. So I think for me, what really helps is creating that space. And I don't know if it's an ADHD thing or just a personal thing, but just movement. Like if I'm stuck at home, I would start cleaning the house. I would start kind of moving, like dancing around sometimes, just anything to like get like motions. And that's been really, really helpful to just clear that space and help the words come through.
Okay, one more thing real quick. There's this amazing podcast episode that's Nathan Fielder and Alexis Demi, I think her name is. She's Maddie on Euphoria. And then Nathan Fielder's like a weirdo comedian. I love him. And like for some reason they're on a podcast together. It makes no sense. But like he's talking about how he's anxious all the time. So she's like, "Oh, sometimes I like crawl around my house and pretend I'm a cat." And he was like, "What?" Like if someone out weirds him, like that's saying something. And like he's like, "What, like aren't you worried people will see you?" And she's like, "Well, I like close the blinds. And I just like it just helps me like get out of my head and like feel like I'm in a different space altogether." And she's like, "I think you should be a bird. Like if you want to pretend to be an animal, I think flapping would help you a lot." And then he talks about how like he's like, even if all the doors are closed and the windows are closed and no one can see me, I still feel like I would feel like people are judging me. And they were kind of talking about how that feeling is like, like the panopticon feeling of, constantly being watched. And I think like social media and the internet definitely like gives us that feeling a lot, but that is like literally something I'll do sometimes. It's like if I'm like stuck in my head and like sometimes if it's like nighttime and I don't want to go for a walk or whatever, I'll like literally just like be a cat. Or like sometimes I listen to the Kate Bush song, Wuthering Heights, and I do the dance, or like just like be a weirdo alone in my house, like, and move my body. It helps so much. Like I can feel the energy like releasing, even if it's not like anything like crazy heavy exercise or anything, just like movement.
I love that. I love the way that we can sort of feel that energy is sort of going through us and like getting that movement in. I think a lot of us do daily walks. So I think it's really something that if you're not doing daily walks, then you should try out, because that's, I think, so both walking and showering get you in that theta waves. It's like a repetition thing that gets your brain moving in a certain way. And it really helps you think a lot about what's in your subconscious and like what you need to get through. So if you can't take a daily walk, then just take another shower and you'll work things out. Another thing that I want to ask you all is like, how do you find other good writers that you can get really inspired by, whether it's their style that's like so different than yours but you admire a lot, or just like things that you want to read and get inspiration from? I would love to know. Um, one of my favorite writers, because of her style, is Parker from Boys Club. Because she not only writes about really interesting things, but she has a totally different style than myself. So I'm, I don't know. I just love reading her work. It's just so different, but in a good way, obviously.
So in Providence, which is where I live in Providence, Rhode Island, there's a writers club, which is like, it's a literal place. And there's like a workspace, there's a podcast recording studio, and there's like conference areas, and then like all the local writers, there's like a bookshelf with all their current and most recent works. And like, I've never had this anywhere else I've lived, because I used to live in New York. I'm sure it existed in New York, but Providence is small enough of a city, I think. It's like really affordable. And then there's like writing classes and clubs. Like I'm in the science fiction club, which is really fun. So that's been like really big for me, because having like writers I like that like do not write the same stuff as me at all is like really helpful and really inspiring. Because I also write poetry. I have like a pen name and everything, so I like to read other people's poetry, and that's also nice too, because I can like literally switch off my, not persona, but like I think if I'm submitting poetry or like sharing poetry and people Google my name, they're gonna be like just seeing a ton of like crypto and tech stuff, and like it, I like having this other version of myself that isn't clouded by like anyone else's like idea of me, I guess. And yeah, those like community spaces help a lot. And then also I love comedy as well. That was like a really good thing to bring in. I love watching stand up. Sometimes I'll go to live comedy shows and stuff. I like to bring humor a lot into my writing too, because I don't know, it's just like it just makes writing more enjoyable, I think. So yeah.
I'll
Well,
chime in.
comedians are not just performers; they are writers as well.
Yeah. 100%.
I'm
It was
gonna
one of
chime.
the things. Oh, sorry.
I'm
Yeah.
just trying to make my exit. I'm sorry, I have to go
Oh,
to a. But thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to watch the replay.
it was really nice to hear you and to meet you.
It was so nice to meet you.
Bye. Thank
See you in my inbox. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I like, for a while I worked for Consensus as the senior copywriter, and when I was interviewing, one of the like last interviews, I was asked like, who are your favorite comedians, and like, what's your process, like what do you find funny in writing? And like, even though the job wasn't directly related to like humor writing, it is still important, because it shows like that you can be like smart and quick-witted like with shorter writing and stuff. So I thought that was interesting.
You've had so many lives. You were like, yeah, I used to write for this underground magazine. I used to work for Consensus. I
Yeah.
used to be this. That's crazy. I mean, I guess all of us have in some sort of way, but it's really great to hear.
Yeah, it's like my friends are always like, how long have you lived? Like, are you like a vampire or something? Because yeah, I've had like a lot of like career switches. I think it's ADHD too, honestly.
I also collect stories. So, like, getting into the most wild situations is the best way to tell a good story. And like, these aren't stories that I can really tell, but like, I think that, yeah, I think putting yourself in compromising situations while can be, you know, extreme and sometimes, but I think it gives you experience, right? Life experience that you wouldn't otherwise get.
It's like doing
Yes.
it for the plot, as if
Yes,
you were in
exactly.
like your own movie and you want it to be
Yeah.
more interesting of a story.
Yeah.
Doing it for the plot. That's funny. That happened like early COVID. I was like writing on Medium a lot, and like at that time, their like pay algorithm for writers was way better. But I'd never had like a story go like super viral, and I had this like, I have like a back injury that I've had for a long time, but in 2020 it like I slipped a disc and was completely immobilized and had to have like like firemen lift me onto a gurney and stuff and like all this stuff. And it was just like a crazy story. And when it was done, I was like, I need to like get this out of my head and just like write it in like the most like raw way possible. And like I posted it thinking no one would ever read it. And it was like the most viral thing I've ever written. Like it got like put on a bunch of other websites. I like was like the writer of the month for Medium. Like I didn't even think it was good. It was something I wrote like in an hour. Like I was just like, get it out of my system. And it really like taught me how much like just like not filtering yourself, I think also helps a lot too.
Yeah, I think writing is great for processing. I mean, I didn't do it for the plot, but I once dated definitely what you would call the wrong guy, who turned out to be obviously the wrong guy, and some really not savory things conspired. And eventually I wrote about that entire breakup and the fear I had of him physically doing or harming me and all of those things. And I moved away from that city, but there was a point where I visited again, and then all of these things came back up, and then I wrote this thing. And after that, I could kind of close that chapter. So I think that's maybe also one aspect of writing, especially if you do it very personally, that can help. And sometimes it can even just be in a journal, right? It doesn't have to be, well, on chain. Certain things don't need to be on chain. I think it's important too. But in terms of, I think you asked initially about how to find new writers and kind of stories you find interesting. And so I'm pretty old school, I guess, because I really love my local library. I'm even volunteering and reading to like 5-year-olds. And it's really interesting because these kids' stories, those are all stories, right? And they are very condensed format. So if you have like a picture book, this story is like in 30 pages, what other authors put on 300. So I think I actually find kids' books is a great exercise. I think we should all do it. And they have great art. But also in terms of finding writers, like I found a lot of books that I ended up loving because some librarian decided to put them prominently on the shelf. Like, and I have no idea who they were, but I'm eternally grateful because I ended up loving that book, right? So there's that. And the other thing I do, I subscribe to newsletters from authors I like David Epstein, who wrote this book about generalists, for example. He has a really good newsletter that covers a lot of like different topics, and often he also mentions other writers. So then you come across those. And then there's this guy, his Substack is called The Honest Broker. And I think he started as like a music critic. And this guy I also became obsessed with. And I don't even remember how I found him, I think, through one of those tech newsletters I subscribe to. So I'm trying to get a lot of human curation in my, well, content diet, I would say.
That is a great newsletter. I love it as well. Speaking of kids' books, I get so much inspiration from not just like kids in general, but like and how they play, but like watching both like recent kids TV shows and just like not all, and also anime, but like just like random stuff for kids because they have like such wild imaginations and can sort of make these connections between culture that they don't even realize is like culture. But like for example, one time I started watching this show called Batman on Wheels on HBO, and like it has the most Gen Alpha, Gen Z references that that I would not understand if I didn't also like randomly like pay attention to TikTok as well. It is wild how they sort of infused, kid culture into this show that adults would never understand. So yeah, I just love sort of experiencing people who are always thinking about play. And in Radar, we talk about play a lot and
That was our
love
last report.
currently.
Yeah. Last report was a more playful future. It's crazy how they intertwine too, because now that we're talking about love, it's so many more themes that were in the play report are coming up. And yeah, also speaking of my many lives, I was a camp counselor for a while, and like and like when I was in college in the summer, and like I never knew kids were so inspiring and like interesting. Like they have less of a filter, but like I was like living in a cabin with a bunch of 11-year-olds all summer, and like just like the stories they would make up and like the fun games they would play, and even like their interpersonal drama with each other, like it's just really like inspiring and interesting.
Sorry to interrupt the flow, but I have to drop off. Thanks so
Yeah,
much
me
for having me,
too.
Riley. And it was super nice meeting all of you.
Yeah,
Nice to
thank
meet
you
you.
so much. It
Yeah,
was so
thank you
great to
both.
hear
Great
these
meeting
types of people.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
And it was
Well,
only the three musketeers.
Yeah.
well, so we can keep talking, or we can call it a day. It's up to you two. If you want to keep
I'm
talking, that's
good.
fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm down to keep talking.
I think
Okay.
kids' books are a good topic. I think
Yeah,
also
it
fairy
is.
tales, by the way, is like
Yes.
reading these old because so we have this free book shelf in the neighborhood where people just put the books they don't want anymore, and then other people take some, and then others replenish, and it's never empty. And once I took a book from there, and it has like these old fairy tales from like Germany and Europe generally, I think from like the 15th century. It's really interesting reading some of those. Some of them are very grim. There's
So
even one
these are
from
more like
Martin Luther.
true crime stories,
They
basically.
are basically true crime, but it's also about teaching kids to not misbehave.
Well, you know
So,
what's
yeah.
interesting about fairy tales is that they tell often the hero's journey, and I think we sort of lose that in the things that we read in cryptos. Like there is no concept of like how our marketing and our sort of what we read tells any sort of story for the most part. It's like we read the most bland marketing, the most bland stories from in the space, and especially in tech, like there is no concept of like, oh, this, of like a journey, of the flow of a journey. Like first of all, I'm wondering why that is, and secondly, like if these teams were to do that, I don't think they understand like how popular they would be, or like how much they would be able to build a loyal community if they were to tell a real story rather than solely relying on memes that do nothing for a story whatsoever.
Right. I think this is like a big part of the work I do at Hype and some of the other places I've worked before is like not just lore, but like I was talking about this with my coworker Rachel, who she saw that I tweeted about the show, and she's like, "Oh my god, I love Riley."
We love Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel rules. She's awesome. Shout out to Rachel. She's probably watching this. But yeah, we were talking about how like every different blockchain in my head is like this different universe, and like at one point, I made this giant Miro board that had like a personality for each blockchain and like different like pictures from Pinterest and stuff, and like a persona. Like Tezos was like goth art kids in like art school, and like they were like really like emotional, and they would write poetry and stuff. And then like we were talking about how like Monero is like the paranoid drug dealer, like just like all these different like personalities. So a lot of the like first thing I do when I work with a new client is I like just like try out their product, look at their website and protocol and get familiar with it, and then like create that world where I like literally just like collage and like make a whole like personality. And like it seems insane, and then when you present it to people and they resonate with it, they're like, oh, actually this is really cool, and like it makes it a lot easier to create content and just shape the brand narrative. Like one of the clients I'm currently working with, they used to be a DEX that was just like your average decks. Like they completely rebranded, and now they're lore driven. It's like very like mystical themed, and like every step of people in the points campaign for before their airdrop is like their hero's journey, and they create a character like D&D style with different like strengths and weaknesses. And there's like spell casting and magic, and like not just like they've grown a lot, but like the people who are a part of their community now are much more active. And it was like a huge difference. So I think like something I learned when I started working in crypto was like I thought that way of thinking and like storytelling and stuff in my head was like normal and everyone did it. But I don't think that's true.
No.
And like it's actually a skill people will like pay you money for. So like being able to understand the technology and apply that storytelling is like very valuable, I found.
Super valuable. Yeah. Because like nobody does it.
Yeah.
Or I think probably it's that more people understand it than we know, but it's that either their teams or their founders don't allow them to like go that way. So I think that we just need to have more examples of teams doing what you just described, of like getting people involved in the lore beyond just saying, hey, there's lore here. Like like I was saying earlier, like, hey, we're world building here, but like just doing it rather than telling you we're gonna do it. And or like it's like when I tell someone a story, I'm not saying that, hey, I'm gonna tell you a story. You just like go into it and like
exactly
bring you bring people in. It's like I love that. I would love to get involved with that because not only do I love mystical stuff, and like I think that this space could resonate really well with like it's called Ethereum, and it's very like mystical, and like it fits so well.
I mean, it's the dark forest, right? I think that's
exactly
the prime background for the mystical, the dark forest.
Yeah. I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say on this, since you mentioned like the founders and stuff, I think that is probably a big reason this doesn't happen a whole lot, because I'm also now at a very like tech focused, like it's a dev product. Like you would probably never use it like as an end user, or it is in something else and you're not aware it is there, right? So they're kind of really focused on product development and like the features. And when you ask them why they are building it, or then they will always come with the product answer. It's like, yeah, so people can get better data. Like, yeah, okay, but what's the point of that, right? Like, it's not like you want, I don't know, like, okay, they get better data, and then what? Like the level lower or higher, I don't know, however you want to phrase it, usually doesn't really get discussed a whole lot. So even I pushed for that at where I'm at the moment. Like, okay, actually this blockchain data is supposedly public, but it's really hard to get. But what is the broader point of making that more widely available? Like, what is the kind of view of humans that we have that makes that want them to have access to this information, right? Because at the end of the day, maybe we think everybody should have access to the same information and then be able to make their own like view of the world. And maybe this is what we're actually trying to sell here, like at least on the bigger level, right? Of course, the builders who just want to index like EVM chain, okay, they can do that. But if you want to draw somebody in that's maybe more interested in like your motivation and maybe the hero journey as well. Like, okay, what can we do in this seemingly dystopian world to maybe provide a little bit of hope? Maybe that's something else we need to do. And of course, marketing is often the first thing that gets slashed when the bear market hits. It's also like often one of the things people don't see the immediate value, because sometimes it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to measure like, okay, we actually now have a really like enthusiastic fan here. Like we have like 10 power fans. Like, let's say you have 10 power fans. Isn't that nicer than having 1,000 airdrop hunters? But no, of course, it's not measured like that. It's like, oh yeah, but our VCs and everybody else wants to see growth. So we need to now we need to do this Galaxy campaign and give everybody points. Like, lore doesn't matter. Like, just,
Or this person did it and they were successful, so now let's do the
Yeah.
same thing. And it's like,
So
no.
let's now hire girls on jet ski and put like bear heads on them. Like, okay, maybe not. Just because it worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for us. Like, but yeah, so I think,
Yeah.
and the lack of like examples that did it successfully so far.
I think the nature of the space sort of gives way to like focusing on volume at all costs because of VCs. But I think we can also, as you described, sort of account for love as a metric as well. And so how do we? And so the question is like, how do we tell that story of not only hope and possibility and imagination, but also like love, and how do we help? I think a lot of people need help with loving something. You can have loyalty without love. You can have users who don't love your product but use it because they want to speculate or they want to make money. That's not love, right? And I think that storytelling and writing and figuring out how to tell that story, not just to the people who are using your product now, but people who you want to use in the future, is really important.
That just gave me like chills too, because I was like thinking about like what products do I love, and usually that like icks me out because I'm like, I don't want to love something that I buy. Like that's like, I'm like, being brainwashed or whatever. But like like I thought about like Tezos as a chain, but also like Object and like FX Hash. Like I love Tezos. Like I don't care if every layer 2 creates the same exact marketplace as Tezos. It just won't be the same. Like there's something that I am like inherently attached to, like the energy that exists there. Like I love it. And then like, there's other things like these like zebra markers. I have like every color of every single one. And like I don't care if a better marker were to come along. Like I love these so much that they become a part of my daily life. Like how do we create that like window for people? And I think storytelling is a big part of it. Like when you were talking about data, Naomi, I was thinking about like how many people know every single detail of a made-up universe because they love the books or they love the story. And it's like technically useless information. It's like completely made up stuff. Like if you know the monetary system of like Skyrim, like the video game, like that's something because like you're just so passionate about like living in that world and in your imagination. It's like you choose to spend your time there. So like how to create that in marketing is like a lot of people like the powers that be. That's why it's nice to work in an agency now, because people are paying us to do marketing. Whereas like when I was working in house, sometimes it would be like a battle of like, just let me be creative. And they were like, we want to see results now. So yeah, it's nice to be able to like really like let the creativity wild with some clients. And then the results happen, but over time.
Yeah. I tell people that I don't invest with money because I don't have any, but I invest with love. and so I think you can tell where I invest my love. Mostly here lately in places like Boys Club and Farcaster, other places that help me feel like I have a community that also loves me back. And I think that's important for investing, is like, okay, that's my ROI, right? Is like, I can love you, but do you love me back? And I think that it it sort of goes all the ways, like, and so I think about it, not just love and like not just what I get, but it's like, do I care, right? Do I care about seeing the people here succeed? and then can I form that story in my head? Can I tell other people that story who want to hear it from me? And if I can't, then that's a problem, and or it's just like there's a gap there. So I guess that's how I feel.
I like wrote that down immediately. It's like
Yeah.
I also feel the same way. Like I always see people like making a lot of money in crypto. I'm like, I think you need to have money first.
I
Like it's
think
starting
so
to
too. I feel like I'm doing something very wrong because I'm still not crypto rich. Like I've been here for 6 years and I'm like
I've been
still
here for a
working
long
like a
time.
normal person. Like I think I did something wrong. I should have YOLO'd into the meme coins, but I was just like, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
but
know.
like investing with love is such an interesting way to put it. Like, yeah, like there's so much that I've like labor of love. There's so much labor I put into things like Boys Club or like the early days of Radar that I didn't even think about as labor because I just love doing it so much. But it was like time and energy that I wasn't like getting like materially rewarded for. Over time it became extremely rewarding, like enriching in my life. But yeah, I wouldn't have it like I wouldn't ever change that. I never felt like I wasn't being compensated. It just felt like I just never had enough time.
When I
Yeah.
so yeah, 2 years back or so, we were trying to run a startup, and our idea was to do that in the near ecosystem. So I was like, I started writing because I saw they didn't really have good writers in that ecosystem. Like there wasn't a whole lot of like there were a lot of people writing threads or like tweets and shit posts and memes. But there wasn't really like a writing. So I was like, okay, the one thing I can do, because I was feeling super useless as my startup, because it was like doing tech stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm not an engineer. I have no clue how to do this HTML, CSS, JS thing. So let me see how it can be useful. So I ended up spending a lot of time, and nobody asked me to do that. And so I started writing a lot there and hosting these spaces and doing threads and whatnot. And the startup fell apart, but I continued doing it because I felt like, okay, this was actually quite a relatively diverse community for like a crypto, like L1 chain thing. And then I continued doing it. And then sometimes people would come to me and ask, like, so are you getting paid by the Near Foundation? I'm like, no, I never got paid for any of this. Like, I did it because, I was feeling like I'm doing like a good thing here. I could invite my friends to speak on these panels and bring people together. And sometimes they actually became friends and sometimes they didn't, but they took something away. So yeah, I think this giving with like love or giving with your time, which is ultimately, like how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. So it's quite important how you choose to spend your time and your days. So I feel that's something that people don't really calculate as much in crypto because they always see everything through the lens of money, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's part of that story that you tell as well. That's part of your experience. I think that's super valuable.
I always try to get people like to see like, there's more than the money. Like the money can only be a means. Like, sure, having a certain amount, you can live comfortably and don't have to worry about like food and stuff is great. But yeah, there's much more we can measure than how much our token has gone up. Like,
Yeah.
Right, like crypto is a technology and money is just one thing built on the technology, but somehow it's become like the main thing, or like people they see it as the same, but it's just crypto enables the monetary systems. But yeah.
It's nice we got stuff like Paragraph now or like Fileverse where you can actually do stuff that is not financial.
Yeah.
And it is like backed on chain, so there's like some use to it. Yeah. I hope that continues.
Fileverse, you can collaborate with people in like a Google Drive style thing. I love that.
Yes.
So that being said, we have just about 10 minutes left. What I want to do is ask you both what tools that you use to be a successful writer. I think we've talked about Paragraph and just now Fileverse, but are there others that someone who's listening or watching might be able to use to help them?
I'm very old school, but I have like a blue notebook. And so I write everything down that comes in my head. And the funny story behind the blue notebook is I got it for my birthday. And I had raved to a friend about how much I like Max Richter and his blue notebook and his idea that music can be a space for thinking. So I have like certain pieces of music that for me are kind of like, okay, I turn them on and I'm like, okay, this is a space for thinking, this is now like our thinking zone. And sometimes you think stupid shit, but you write it down and you never know what it turns into. So I write a lot of notes of like when I come across things that people say that are interesting, or I notice stickers on the traffic lights that say something insulting, but also eye-catching. So I write pretty much everything down. I also use this newsletter aggregator called Meco, meco.app, to keep my inbox clean of all the newsletters and have like a separate place where I can go through them and stay kind of on top of what's happening and the people I'm subscribed to. And well, then this year I also spoiled myself and I bought this digital notebook. It's called Remarkable. And the main reason I bought it is because I was trying to get away from screens, because you tend to get distracted when I try to read some like newsletter in the inbox and then something else happens. You're like, okay, let me just quickly check Telegram. So I got that one and I sent all of the articles over a week on that device. And then on Sundays, I usually have like an allocated time to go through these. And then the stuff I find interesting, I will, underline and all of that. And then you can look on the app on your desktop later on and kind of start writing from there. And then because English is also not my first language, and even if it wasn't, I think it's always good to work on vocabulary. So I even have like vocabulary cards lying around. And when there is like metaphors or sentences that I think are really well structured in any other book, I also write them down. And I have like a line over my desk, and then I just put them up there. So there's a lot of manual labor involved in my process.
That's really cool. I have the like magnetic poetry on my fridge, like the words, but it's all from the show I Think You Should Leave, which is a sketch comedy show. So the words are like very weird. So it like helps a little bit. But yeah, that's just for fun mostly. But I'm very big on like digital tools and like which ones I use. And physical too. Like I have like a similar thing. Like I'm very much into like gluing stuff and like collecting random like scraps of things, and then I literally have like, like an agenda and like what phase is the moon in and like whatever I feel like. But I've noticed that like the bullet journal method, which is like very open-ended anyway, has like worked for me for like probably like 5 or 6 years now. I have a whole shelf that's like literally just filled journals. And it works because I can change it whenever I want. Like if I no longer want to use a specific format, I could just change it. And then Notion, I found, is like the digital version of a bullet journal. So I have like tons of Notion pages that like I collect, different things together. And then the past couple of years, Arena, like REARE.NA, like I've used that a lot. Like I find a lot of inspiration there. Like I'll upload my own stuff, but I'll also like look at other people's boards and like, put different stuff and sort it. I've noticed like over the years, a lot of work I do, while it may be different, it's all like some form of curating and like gathering things, like putting them in piles and like sorting them and finding like common threads and ideas. So any tool that I can use to do that. Miro is a big one. Like I love Miro. No one does Miro like Radar. I don't even know how to like recreate that
That's
anywhere
true.
else. Yeah. It's like
Um,
it's just like there's always like 50 cursors and they're all like moving around, and like it's such a frenetic energy. But I use it a lot for a lot of different things too, just like on my own too. So yeah, those are the tools I mostly use.
Yeah, Radar is a
once
really nice
made-
place to.
Sorry. I was going to say I even
Um,
once used Miro to like plan my next year and shit like that.
Yeah.
Mira is a really great tool. I
Yeah.
also use Notion a lot, and I use Grammarly. I think in the past 2 years, I'm now at about almost 30 million words analyzed on Grammarly. So, but the thing with Grammarly is that it sort of leads you in the wrong direction sometimes, or often actually. Like it wants to correct your voice, and so if you use it, it's gonna give you the Grammarly tone, and so you'll have to like really know your own writing, or else you'll sound like everyone else who's also
Yeah.
using Grammarly, and so that kind of sucks. I think that sort of it makes being a really great editor a necessity, especially when you're trying to use tools like that. But otherwise, Notion is really great. And then I don't know. I don't do a lot of writing in a notebook just because it's not what I do. But it's still fun every once in a while.
I also write
Yeah.
postcards. I don't know if that counts, but
Oh, definitely.
Like to people or to yourself?
yes, to people. Like so I
Oh.
started this channel even on Farcaster. So I got some from
Oh, I think I
friends,
saw that.
and one they even sent me from a meetup they had in like Brussels where I wasn't there. So everybody signed. It's really cute. It's like the URL to IRL, but one person couldn't come. But I think one I wanted to mention is it's called Hemingway Editor. It's also interesting sometimes to just
Yes.
copy your passages in and see what it says. Like sometimes I still ignore it just because it says it's a long sentence. Doesn't mean I'm gonna reduce the sentence, but it's still a good guide.
Right. Wow. This has been so much fun.
Very fun. It's like the first time in a while I've like had a like chill talk with like other creative people. It's always inspiring.
I'm really glad we could do this.
Me too.
I think we learned a lot. We talked about a lot of different things, and so I'm really excited to sort of come back to this and see what we can cut up and share. But otherwise, I know I had a lot of fun, and I think I hope the viewers and listeners had a lot of fun too. If you're still watching, I hope you can share some things that you liked from our broadcast today, and we will see you next month. I'm not sure what the topic will be yet, but I have a couple of ideas. But yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting us, and we will be back.
Thanks for having me.
Bye,
Thanks
everyone.
for having us.
Bye.